This is Samuel. On a cold night after leaving a prayer service, the police planted a package of drugs in his car, a man of God, a deacon of the church, and accused him of being a drug dealer in front of everyone, a humiliation that was designed to break his spirit. Life sometimes puts us through trials that seem made to destroy everything we have built with righteousness and sweat. Have you ever felt as if the heavens were silent just when you needed an answer the most? Before I tell you how, God moved the pieces on this chessboard of injustice and exposed the sham they set up against Samuel. Comment here where you are watching from and subscribe to the channel. Believe me, you won't want to miss what happens when we place our cause in the hands of the only advocate who has never lost a battle. His story is proof that the prayer of a righteous person is powerful in its effects. That night, the air inside Samuel's old Chevette was filled with a peace that only those who have just come from the presence of God know. He was returning from the Bible study at Brother Carlos's house, humming an old hymn softly, feeling his heart warmed by the fellowship. The street in his neighborhood, always so familiar, was dark and silent. For him, it was just another end to a journey, the way back to the embrace of his wife, Marta, and the peaceful sleep of his children. Little did he know that this serenity was about to be torn apart by a calculated evil, a test of faith that would mark his soul forever. Samuel's peace was a fortress built over 45 years of life. A skilled carpenter, he was a man who found God in the grain of the wood, in the patience of sanding until the surface was perfect. At the community's Baptist church, his name was synonymous with trust. As a deacon, his strength was not in fiery speeches, but in the silence with which he listened to the afflicted, in the way his broad shoulders seemed to carry a bit of the other's pain. He was living proof that true strength does not shout, it simply is. This calm, however, would be his greatest weapon, and to the wrong eyes, his greatest sign of guilt. Suddenly the blue and red of the siren exploded in the rearview mirror, painting the inside of the car with colors of panic. Samuel's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly calmed down. It must be a routine checkpoint, he thought, pulling the car over carefully. The police car stopped behind him, and two officers got out. One of them, older, with a look that seemed to carry the weight of the world's cynicism, walked to his window. It was Officer Miller. The other, younger Officer Davis, remained a step behind, with an expression of someone who would rather be anywhere else but there. "Good evening, sir. Burnt-out taillight," Miller said, his voice laden with a contempt that did not match the supposed infraction. His tone said it all. This wasn't about a light bulb. Samuel felt a chill run down his spine, the same chill every black man knows when authority approaches him for no apparent reason. He just nodded with his usual calm. "Documents, please." As he leaned over to get his wallet from the glove compartment, the next order came like a stab. "Get out of the vehicle. Hands where I can see them." The tranquility of the night was over. Samuel obeyed without question. Outside, the cold night air hit him harder. He felt the stares of the few neighbors peeking through their windows, the curtain of their quiet lives being opened, to watch his humiliation. While Officer Davis asked for his documents, Miller, with suspicious agility, leaned into the car. Samuel saw, out of the corner of his eye, the quick and almost imperceptible movement of the officer's hand under his seat. It was a swift, furtive gesture, but to Samuel, who knew every inch of his car, that movement was strange, invasive. What happened next was a cruel play. Officer Miller stood up with a small white package at his fingertips, wrapped in plastic. He held it up against the light of the police car, a triumphant smile on his face. "Well, well, what do we have here?" he said, in a loud voice, so that anyone listening could understand. Samuel's world stopped. That package was not his. It had never been there. The realization of the setup hit him like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of him. The injustice was so clear, so blatant, that for a second he couldn't form a single word. The humiliation was immediate and overwhelming. "So, you're a drug dealer, are you? Walking around with that saintly face," Miller mocked, approaching him. The younger officer, Davis, looked at the ground, visibly uncomfortable, but complicit in his silence. Before Samuel could even deny it, Miller turned him around sharply and clasped his hands behind his back with the cold metal handcuffs. The click of the lock sounded like a final sentence. "Let's see if that faith of yours gets you out of jail, Pastor," Miller spat near his ear. That mockery was the worst part. It didn't just attack his freedom, but the core of his identity, his faith in God. Pushed into the back of the police car, Samuel felt desperation knocking at his door. The anger, the desire to scream his innocence, the frustration bubbling in his chest. But then something stronger took over. Instead of fighting or struggling, he closed his eyes. The image of his children, his wife's face, the sound of the church hymns, it all came to his mind. There, at the epicenter of the injustice, he remembered who he was. His body was trapped, but his spirit was not. He began a silent prayer, an intimate conversation with God. He didn't ask for revenge. He didn't ask for fire from heaven. He asked for only one thing. Father, may your truth prevail. May your glory be manifested in this. His silence inside that police car was heavier and more eloquent than any shout. The ride to the police station was an exercise in spiritual warfare. Outside, the city passed by like an indifferent blur. Inside the police car, the silence was an arena. On one side, Officer Miller, who was humming a random song from the radio, pleased with his trophy. On the other, Officer Davis, who stared fixedly out the window, as if looking for an escape route for his own conscience. And in the middle, Samuel. With his eyes closed, he was no longer there. His mind was on Psalm 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. He repeated, the verse like a mantra, building an invisible sanctuary around himself, a fortress that the walls of the police car could not contain. The arrival at the police station was a reality shock. The fluorescent lights, cold and unforgiving, seemed to want to expose every pore of his skin, every drop of his humiliation. The smell of disinfectant mixed with old coffee and a vague odor of despair permeated the air. Samuel was led down the hallway like a captured animal. Some officers looked at him with indifference, others with veiled contempt. To them he was just another one, another shackled black body, another statistic to fill out the night's paperwork. In that place, he was not Deacon Samuel. He was not the family man, the respected carpenter. He was a number, an accusation. At the booking desk, Miller recounted the events with a sickening pride. Detained for possession and suspected drug trafficking. Passive resistance. The lie about resistance was the last straw. But Samuel remained silent. What was the point of speaking? To whom? His defense would not be heard there. As the clerk typed slowly, Samuel focused on his breathing. He remembered a sermon by Pastor João about Joseph, sold by his brothers, and thrown in prison on a false accusation. Even in the cistern, even in jail, God was with him. That memory was not a vague comfort, it was a map, a guide to navigate that valley of shadows. The moment of taking his fingerprints was particularly degrading. His hands, the same. Ones he used to build furniture that brought beauty and order to people's homes, the same ones he raised in praise to God, were now being soiled with black ink and pressed against a paper. Each finger rolled by the officer was like a mark of that injustice on his skin. He looked at his stained hands and felt a lump in his throat, but instead of seeing the stain of guilt, he chose to see the hands of a worker, a servant, and he prayed in silence that God would use even that humiliation for his honor. He was granted the right to one phone call. With his hands still stained with ink, he dialed his home number. His heart ached, imagining the shock his wife, Marta, would receive. When she answered, her voice sleepy, he felt an immense desire to break down, to tell her all the evil, the whole setup. But he couldn't. He had to be her rock at that moment. Marta, love, it's me. Listen calmly. I'm at the downtown police station. There was a problem, a mix-up, but I'm okay. I just need you to pray, okay? Pray with all your faith. God is in control. Each word was measured, weighed, forged to convey peace in the midst of chaos. On the other end of the line, Marta's silence lasted an eternity. Samuel could feel her shock, her mind trying to process the impossible information. Samuel, police station? What did they do to you? Her voice came out choked, a mixture of fear and protective fury. He knew she knew him, knew that her faith in him was unshakable. I can't talk much now, my dear. Just trust in God and trust in me. I love you. Take care of the children. Hanging up that phone was one of the hardest things he had ever done. He had just thrown a bomb into his family's lap and could do nothing to protect them from the blast. But Marta was not a woman to be paralyzed by fear. As soon as she hung up, her hands, which were trembling, clenched into fists of determination. She fell to her knees beside the bed, not in despair, but in warfare. She said a quick, fervent prayer, placing her husband in God's hands. Then she stood up and grabbed her cell phone. The first call was to Pastor João. Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire through the church's prayer group. Brothers and sisters, Deacon Samuel has been unjustly arrested. Let's raise a cry to the heavens. On that cold night, dozens of homes became outposts in a spiritual battle. While the prayer network was forming, Samuel was taken to a cold cell. The sound of the metal door slamming echoed in his soul, the sound of loneliness. The place was small, with a concrete bench and a sour smell of neglect. There, without the noise of the police station, the silence was different. It was an accusing silence. Alone in the dim light, the adrenaline began to wear off and the crushing weight of the situation came crashing down on him. Doubt, like a serpent, began to coil around his heart. What if my prayers aren't heard? What if I rot in here? My name, my family. That was his darkest moment. Sitting on the cold bench, his head in his hands, he felt completely abandoned. The faith that had seemed so solid hours before now seemed fragile, a thin thread about to break. He thought of his children, having to hear at school that their father was a drug dealer. He thought of Marta, having to face the looks of pity and judgment. A single hot tear rolled down his face. It was the tear of helplessness, of the good man who finds himself swallowed by an evil he cannot understand, much less fight. Father, why have you forsaken me? The cry of Jesus on Calvary echoed in his own spirit, but at the bottom of the pit, at the lowest point of his anguish, a light turned on. It was not an audible voice, nor a vision. It was a memory, a certainty that sprang from the depths of his soul. The memory of the Bible study that night, hours before everything happened. The theme had been Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. The word was not just an ancient text. It was a personal, living promise. In that instant he understood. This was not the end. It was the stage. And God was about to enter the scene. A supernatural calm enveloped him, and he straightened up. The inner battle was won. Now, he just had to wait. In the command room of the station, Captain Regina Alves rubbed her tired eyes. The night had been long, full of mundane incidents and endless bureaucracy. She just wanted to finish her shift and go home. A black woman in a position of power within a predominantly male and white institution, she had learned to be twice as tough, twice as vigilant. Her personal phone vibrated on the desk. It was her mother. She answered with a sigh, knowing it would be a quick chat about church and family matters. She listened with half an ear, responding with monosyllables, while her eyes scanned the reports on her screen. "Oh, my daughter, you won't believe the latest," her mother's excited voice sounded on the other end. "Today, Deacon Samuel, that good man from the carpentry shop, you know, the one who fixed the church gate for free for us, he said such a beautiful prayer in the study group, a real man of God, a blessing in our community." Captain Alves murmured "That's nice, Mom," while signing a document. The name Samuel hung in the air for a moment, a common name, but her mother's detailed description, the good man from the carpentry shop, painted a vivid picture in her mind. She knew her mother's church, the small Baptist congregation in the neighborhood where she grew up. She was about to hang up, saying she needed to get back to work, when her office door opened. Officer Miller entered, with the posture of a peacock displaying its feathers. There was a glint of arrogance in his eyes that Captain Alves knew well, the glint of someone who feels powerful by belittling others. "Captain, incident report. Drug trafficking bust. We caught a big fish tonight," he said, throwing the report on her desk. She raised an eyebrow, ended the call with her mother, "Mom, I'll call you later," and picked up the paper. Her eyes ran over the lines of the report, the standard narrative of a stop that went right. And then she came to the name of the detainee, Samuel Diaz. The name echoed in her mind, colliding with her mother's voice that still resonated in her ears. Deacon Samuel, the good man from the carpentry shop. A coincidence? Perhaps. But Captain Alves had learned in her career that coincidences, especially those involving officers like Miller, deserved a closer look. She looked up from the paper and stared at the handcuffed man being escorted behind Miller. She saw a middle-aged black man, his head held high but with an expression of wounded dignity. There was none of the wild desperation of a criminal caught in the act, nor the aggression of someone who feels wronged. There was a strange calm, a serenity that violently contrasted with the accusation of drug trafficking. She looked from Samuel to Miller, who was smiling with an air of superiority. Her instinct, sharpened by years of experience dealing with the nuances of prejudice within the police force itself, went off like a fire alarm. Something here was terribly wrong. "Miller, what was the justification for the stop?" she asked, her voice neutral, almost casual. "Burnt-out taillight, Captain. Standard procedure," he replied, overly confident. "And how did the suspect react?" "He was passive, Captain. A little too passive. I got suspicious right away. These people, when they get too quiet, it's because they're hiding something." The racist generalization in the phrase, "these people," did not go unnoticed by Captain Alves. It was as if Miller had just handed her the loose end of a very tangled thread. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on the officer. This case had just become personal. "I want to see the footage from your body cam now," she ordered, her tone shifting from casual to an unquestionable command. Miller's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He hadn't expected that. "Captain, the camera had a battery failure right at the time of the stop. It only started recording again when we were already in the patrol car. You know how it is, this equipment." The excuse was flimsy, a classic from the handbook of someone with something to hide. Captain Alves smelled the lie in the air, strong and unmistakable. She stood up, authority emanating from her every gesture. "This isn't a request, Officer Miller. It's an order. Bring the camera. And Officer Davis." She turned to the younger partner, who was as pale as a sheet of paper. "You're coming with me to my office. We're going to have a talk." The panic in Davis's eyes was the confirmation she needed. She knew that, away from Miller's intimidating influence, the younger officer was the key. She led him to her office, closed the door and faced him. "Officer Davis, I'm going to ask you this only once, and I suggest you think very carefully about your career before you answer. What really happened during that stop?" The young officer swallowed hard. He looked at the door, at the captain, at his own trembling hands. He was trapped between the fear of Miller and the fear of committing perjury before a superior who was clearly not in a joking mood. The silence stretched for a minute that felt like an hour. Captain Alves just waited, not pressing, letting the weight of Davis's conscience do the work. Finally, the young man broke down. "Captain, the tail light wasn't burnt out. It was Miller. He planted the package in the car." The confession came out as a whisper, but in the quiet of the room it sounded like a thunderclap. Every word from Davis confirmed Captain Alves's suspicion, painting the full picture of that deliberate and cruel injustice. As Davis, between tears of nervousness and relief, detailed how Miller had been planning to teach a lesson to someone in the neighborhood for weeks and chose Samuel at random, driven by pure prejudice, the captain felt a cold, calculated fury grow inside her, a fury against injustice, against the abuse of power, and against the stain that officers like Miller left on the institution she had sworn to honor. Samuel's silent, distant prayer was being answered in a way he could never have imagined. With Davis's confession recorded and secured, Captain Alves opened her office door. Outside, Miller was waiting impatiently, holding the body camera. He tried to force a smile when he saw her, but the smile died on his lips when he saw the captain's face. It was a mask of restrained fury and icy determination. "Miller, in my office now," she said, with a voice that left no room for argument. She took the camera from his hand and, before even entering, handed it to another trusted officer. "Take this to forensics. I want every second of footage recovered, especially the files that were corrupted. Top priority." The scene that followed in the captain's office was a complete reversal of power. Miller, who moments before had been preening like the hunter, was now the prey. Captain Alves sat behind her desk, the false accusation report in one hand and the signed statement from Davis in the other. "Officer Miller, you are being formally suspended from your duties effective immediately," she began, her voice as sharp as glass. "You are the subject of an internal investigation for fabricating evidence, abuse of authority, perjury, and misconduct. Surrender your weapon and your badge." Miller's face went through a succession of colors, from the red of anger to the white of panic. What? Captain, this is absurd. That kid Davis doesn't know what he's talking about. It's my word against his, he stammered, his arrogance dissolving into desperation. Captain Alves stared at him, impassive. No, Miller, it's not your word against his. It's your word against his, against the forensic analysis of your body camera, which I am sure will show your little magic trick, and against my conviction that you are a disgrace to this uniform. Now, the gun and the badge on my desk. While Miller's career crumbled under the fluorescent lights of the station, an officer was sent to Samuel's cell. The metal door opened, not with the harsh clang of imprisonment, but with an almost respectful sound. "Mr. Diaz, could you come with me?" "Please?" Samuel stood up, his heart cautious. He didn't know what to expect. He was led back down the same hallway he had passed through in humiliation, but now the stairs were different. There was curiosity, astonishment, and in some, a hint of respect. He was taken to Captain Alves's office. Upon entering, he saw Officer Miller, disarmed, being escorted out by two other officers. Their eyes met for an instant. On Miller's face, there was no remorse, only hatred and the humiliation of defeat. On Samuel's, there was no triumph, only a deep serenity. Captain Alves stood up and walked over to him. "Mr. Samuel Diaz," she said, her voice firm, but with a tone of deep respect. "There has been a terrible mistake tonight. A grave injustice was committed against you. On behalf of this department, I offer you our most sincere apologies." The words apologies and injustice sounded like music to Samuel's wounded soul. He just nodded, still processing the turn of events. "You are free to go. All charges have been dropped, and a dismissal process against the officer who accused you has already been initiated. The truth has come to light, Mr. Diaz." The captain looked at him with genuine admiration, as if she were in the presence of a mystery. She, the authority, the woman of law and logic, could not fully explain the succession of events that night, from her mother's phone call to the inexplicable calm of this man. Samuel walked out the front door of the police station, not as a released suspect, but as an honored man. The cold pre-dawn air had never seemed so sweet, so full of life. He took a deep breath, feeling freedom fill his lungs. Across the street, under a streetlight, he saw a car he knew. It was Pastor João, accompanied by Marta. As soon as they saw him, they ran towards him. Marta's hug was a refuge, a safe harbor, where he finally allowed the tension of that whole night to dissipate into tears of relief and gratitude. The ride home was silent, but it was a different silence from the one in the police car. It was a silence of awe, of reverence. The news had already spread. When they arrived on his street, the lights of several houses were on. Neighbors and church members came out to greet him. There was no loud party, but a corridor of hugs, handshakes, of looks that said, "We prayed and we believed." His honor had not just been restored, it had been forged in the fire of trial, and now shone brighter than ever. The following Sunday, the church was packed. Samuel's testimony was not told by him, but by Pastor João, who narrated the events with a voice choked with emotion. He spoke of the setup, the humiliation, the silent prayer in the police car, and the divine intervention that moved the pieces so perfectly. When Samuel stood up at the pastor's request, the entire church rose to its feet and applauded. It was not applause for a hero, but for the faithfulness of a God who does not abandon his own. Samuel held no grudge or hatred. In his heart, there was only a deep gratitude. He understood that that terrible night was not a random attack, but a permission from God, a trial that came not to destroy him, but to strengthen the faith of an entire community, to show in a visible and undeniable way that the prayer of a righteous person moves heaven and earth. He became a living monument to the sovereignty of God, a constant reminder that human justice may fail, but God's justice never tarries and never errs. That night, under the cold lights of the police station, Samuel didn't have to raise his voice to be heard, for his silent prayer had already echoed in the throne room of the highest justice. He learned the hard way that for a man who bends his knees in faith, there are no walls too high nor false accusations that can prevail. The hand of God had weighed upon the injustice, and the bill was settled in a way that only he knows how, turning a night of shame into an eternal testimony. Samuel's story reminds us that, even in the darkest nights, When injustice seems to triumph and our voice seems to have no strength, there is a greater power at work. Serene faith, the unwavering trust that we are not alone, is our greatest weapon. The answer may not come when or how we expect it, but it always comes. Divine justice may seem silent, but its echo resounds for all eternity, putting every piece in its proper place. Officer Miller was dismissed and faced criminal charges, his career destroyed by his own arrogance. Officer Davis, having cooperated, was transferred and received an administrative sanction, but would forever carry the lesson of that night. Captain Alves, for her part, felt her own long-dormant faith rekindled by that unlikely encounter, remembering that the justice she sought in the law was just a reflection of a much greater justice. For Samuel, life went on. He returned to his carpentry shop, to his family, to his church, but something had changed. His gaze, which was already serene, now carried the weight and the light of one who had been in the valley of the shadow of death and came out sustained by the right hand of God. His story became a legend in the community, told and retold to strengthen the weak and inspire those who doubt. If you know someone who needs their faith strengthened, who is going through an injustice and feels powerless, please share this video. Samuel's journey is proof that our strength is not in shouting, but in trusting. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about how faith in God can indeed move mountains. Thank you for listening.